The anger was instant, and the venom dripped from his words. You damn right you need to talk. Not only have you been with Tom, but you've been with Fred too, and I want to know why. This was just too much. I screamed right back at him. I have not been with Tom. I have not been with Fred. I haven't been with anybody but you for the past 7 years, you dumb bastard. Heck you. You are the one doing the F around here. Not me. Some red-headed bee that I don't know, as well as Nancy. With that I sat down, put my elbows on the table, held my head with my hands, and started crying. I finally quit crying and looked up at him. He was sitting there, glaring at me. What do I do now? We need to talk, but first we both need to calm down. I quietly said, Bob, would you like to go shower and get some clean clothes on? When you are done, I promise, I will answer any questions you have.
Fine.
And with that, he got up and limped toward the stairs. I put the pan and eggs back where they belonged. I had completely lost my appetite. 20 minutes later, he was back downstairs, looking much better. Shaved, hair combed, fresh clothes, and he had his fuzzy slippers on. They were probably a lot more comfortable than any shoes he had. I can only hope he goes along with what I'm about to try. I reached around behind me and got the egg timer off the counter. I sat it on the table between us and tactfully asked, From the beginning, Bob, why do you think I have been seeing Fred? I then set the timer for 5 minutes and looked at him expectantly. Bob thought for a bit and then said, At boys' night out 2 weeks ago, Mike, Tom's friend, said he saw you pick Fred up at that little bar across from Outdoor Sports. He said you left together in Fred's truck and that you were gone for over 3 hours. When you finally got back, he saw you kiss Fred goodbye. I have no idea of where you went or what you may have done in that full-size cab-over camper he has on the back of his truck. That was a week before our birthday. I remember, because you were very late returning from your shopping trip. When I asked you why you were so late, you said, Wouldn't you like to know? And went straight upstairs and took a shower. Now, I assume you wanted to get Fred washed off of you before we made love that night, which we did. When Mike told me what he saw, it wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together. I couldn't believe it. I just sat there and looked at him. He looked right back at me. He then reached over, reset the timer, and then looked at me expectantly. I turned the timer off and said, I'll be right back. I got up, walked out the back door, and went to the boat parked beside the garage. I pulled the tarp off the left side, opened the rod locker, and removed one of the fishing rods. I replaced the tarp and went back to the kitchen. I carefully placed the fishing pole on the table in front of him and sat back down. I reached over, started the timer, and said, Rod blank, reel seat, line guides, and handle, $160. Labor, including the inscription, All My Love, Sam, $120. Reel, $80. 150 yards of special line, $12.50. Total cost, $372.50, plus tax, plus 2 kisses for Fred. The look on your face when I give it to you for your birthday, priceless. That certainly got a reaction. Watching the play of emotions across his face was almost priceless. He started to say something, and then stopped. He started again, and I held up my hand and said, I'm not done yet. I was in Outdoor Sports for over an hour. You know I don't know anything about fishing stuff, and those stupid sales clerks weren't very helpful. I got frustrated and walked out. When I got outside, I saw Fred's truck sitting in front of that bar across the street. So I drove across the street and went in to talk to him. When I explained what I wanted to do for you, he knew exactly what you would like. He told me about a custom fishing rod builder that worked out of his garage. He was kind enough to take me there and help me pick out the components. Larry, the guy who owns the shop, was very nice and agreed to rush the work. Fred then took me back to my car, and I was so happy that everything turned out so well that I leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. When I got home and you asked where I had been, I couldn't tell you the truth and I didn't want to lie to you, so that's why I said what I did. I was hot and sweaty, so I went up and showered because I wanted to be fresh for you. 2 days before our birthday, I met Fred at Outdoor Sports, and he helped me pick out the proper reel and line for your rod. He got a kiss on the cheek that day too. I reached behind me and got the phone out of the charger and sat it on the table in front of him and said, Now, call Fred and get his side of the story. He can also give you Larry's number and you can check with him. I'm done now. I was stunned. I didn't know what to think or say. She goes out and does something very special for our birthday, and I accuse her of screwing my fishing buddy. Oh heck, if Fred ever finds out about that, I'll never hear the end of it. Honey, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. When Mike told me what he did, I should have come home and told you what he said, but I just couldn't. He had me convinced you were having an affair. All I could think about was catching you at it. I really am sorry. She kept it simple. I accept. Honey, would you please do me a favor? Please? Please don't tell Fred about this. He will never let me live it down. Please. I giggled. I couldn't help myself. I got a bad case of the giggles. He was absolutely right. Fred would never let him live it down. Well, I wasn't about to tell Fred, but for entirely different reasons. There is no way I wanted Fred to know about our problems. It wasn't any of his business. Very well, I won't tell Fred if you will tell me why you are seeing that redhead. I'm not seeing any red-headed woman. I don't even know a red-headed woman. What red-headed woman? I will be happy to tell you what redhead. At girls' night out, Janet, Nancy's friend, told me she saw you having dinner with a big busted redhead at that new Italian place. As near as we could figure out, it was a week before our birthday. I couldn't help it. It pissed me off. I couldn't hold back. I exploded. Damn it. Is every son of AB in this city a spy? Is there anybody that minds his or her own business anymore? Heck. Sam flinched and jerked back in her chair. I was mad, and she knew it. I wasn't mad at her. I was just mad at the rest of the world. So this is what started it.
Sam, I'm sorry.
I'm not mad at you. Let me calm down for a minute, and then I will tell you everything. I got up, opened the fridge, and got a Coke. I hobbled my way out to the garage and sat down on the bench. By the time 5 minutes was up, I was over my mad and pretty well had my act back together. Sam came out about then carrying a Coke and sat down beside me. She got up after a bit, went over to my car, bent over by the door, and rubbed the dent. Nice dent, she said. Nice ass. I fired right back at her. We both got the giggles then. Come over here and sit down. I'll see if I can make up a good story about a red-headed woman. What is that sitting beside my car? That big black thing that almost takes up half of the garage. You mean my navigator? Bright girl. Now let's see if you can get 2 in a row. When did you get it? You give it to me for my birthday. Great. You are batting 1,000 so far. Now can you describe in detail what it looked like when you first saw it? The morning of our birthday, after I give you the fish pole, you put a blindfold on me and led me out here into the garage. You then removed the blindfold, and parked in front of me was this beautiful new navigator. It had a yellow ribbon around it with a huge bow. There was a giant card on the windshield that said, "I love you with all my heart," and there were a dozen long stem red roses laying on the middle of the hood. Excellent. You just hit the home run that won the World Series. I don't understand. What are you talking about? Her name is Linda. That's what it says on the name tag she wears. Underneath her name is Red. She is a red-haired lady, so that's what most people call her. Her father owns the largest car dealership in the state. She is the general manager of that dealership. He also owns that new Italian place we were seen having dinner in. We finalized the deal and I signed the papers for your new navigator during that dinner. Do you remember complaining that your car wasn't big enough anymore? Remember telling me that you wanted something bigger and safer for you and the kids? Remember, I told you your car had something wrong with it, and I had to take it to the garage for repair the day before our birthday? I took it to the dealership and signed the title over to them because I traded it in on the navigator. While there, we transferred all your personal stuff to the new vehicle, including the garage door opener. That night, while we were upstairs making love, Red put the navigator in our garage and put the ribbon and card on it. The roses were a surprise to me too. They were her gift to the two of us. I went down to her office the following Monday and thanked her in person. She got a kiss on the cheek, too. I started crying again. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. I just couldn't stop. I don't usually cry so much. The last time I cried this much was the night of my senior prom. My date pushed me out of his car 5 miles from town because I wouldn't give him my cherry. I had to walk home in my prom dress and high-heeled shoes. Now why did I just think of that? I couldn't help myself. I took her in my arms and held her. There sure have been a lot of tears shed around here lately. Quite a few of them by me. I led her back into the house and we sat back down at the table. When she calmed down, I asked, Sam, please don't get upset, but I am curious. Where were you Friday afternoon? Oh, heck. Wrong question. She immediately started crying again. When she was able to talk, she very meekly said, looking for you. When I told you about my business lunch with a client and my meeting scheduled for late that afternoon, you got the strangest look on your face. I thought you were going to meet your red-haired girlfriend. I canceled the lunch and the meeting and left work to go over to your work and follow you. I got tied up in traffic and by the time I got there, you had already left. I'm sorry I doubted you. I just didn't know all the facts then. I drove all over town trying to find you. I finally give up and went home. You got home right after I did, and you had the guiltiest look on your face. That's mainly why I acted like such a ass at the party last night. I wanted to punish you for cheating on me. By the way, where were you? I was the one doing it this time. I couldn't help it. I threw my head back and had a good rib-busting laugh. She was the one sitting there with the confused look now. As soon as I was able to talk, I said, when you told me about your lunch date and late meeting, I knew you did that so you could be with Fred. I left work at noon and drove over to your work so I could catch the two of you together. You left before I got there, and I drove all over town looking for you. When I finally got home, you were already there, and you looked so guilty. That look convinced me that you were with Fred, and I wasn't able to catch you. We both sit there looking at one another. After a while, she got up, got us fresh drinks, and sit back down. Then I asked it. I just blurted it out. How do we explain our underwear? Honest, honey, I washed them a couple of days after our birthday and put them in the drawer with the rest of our play clothes. Honest, that's the last I saw them until last night. Again, we just sit there and looked at one another. Strangely, I believed her. She was telling the truth, and I knew it beyond a shadow of doubt. I looked at the egg timer and the phone laying on the table and said, I don't think we need these anymore. And I put them back where they belonged. She looked up at me and sighed and asked, what now? I don't know. I'm getting kind of hungry though, but I don't think I want a big meal. She got up, put her arms around me, looked up into my eyes and said, buy a girl a cheeseburger and fries. Big guy? It'll cost you. Anything, just feed me. Let's go. We'll take my navigator. I don't want to be seen riding in a car that has a dent in the door. Besides, you're crippled. Very funny. We were gone for well over an hour. When we got home, Nancy's big Suburban was parked at the curb in front of the house, and Nancy was sitting on our front steps. What do you suppose she wants? I asked Sam. I don't have a clue, but you can bet your last dollar that I'm damn well going to find out. Sam didn't hesitate a bit. She bounced out of the navigator, marched right up to Nancy, and forcefully said, we've had about all of you we can stand. Haven't you caused us enough trouble already? Go home and leave us alone. Sam finished her little speech just as I got to the steps. Nancy exploded into tears. She would have fallen off of the steps if I hadn't reached down and caught her arm. Sam looked at me and shrugged her shoulders. She didn't have a clue, and neither did I. I looked back at Sam and said, let's get her in the house and get her calmed down. With me on one side and Sam on the other, we walked/carried Nancy into the kitchen table and sat her down. Damn, this woman could cry. Sam got her a glass of water, sat a box of Kleenex in front of her, and we sat and waited. When she was able to babble, I have never heard, I'm sorry, and please forgive me, so many times in my life. Occasionally, she would get out, it's all my fault. But mostly it was sorry and please forgive me. All of this interspersed between bouts of wails, sobs, and cries. She had Sam horribly outclassed here. This woman was the world's grand champion when it came to turning on female waterworks. At last she got herself settled down and was able to converse somewhat rationally. Sam, Bob, I want you to know that I am so sorry for what happened last night. It was entirely my fault. Nancy, repeating herself, wasn't getting us anywhere. I was about to ask her what she meant when Sam said, I think we get the idea. Now would you quit apologizing and just say what you came here to say? I left Tom. I'm going to divorce him. Sam and I both spoke at the same time. Why? Because he is in a hole. This was going nowhere, fast. Sam finally said, take another drink of water, get your thoughts together, and explain everything from the beginning, please? Nancy took a drink and then looked back and forth at us for a bit. She then said, I'll have to go back a long ways to explain everything. We just nodded, encouraging her to continue. I feel like I need to tell someone. I've never done that before. I haven't even told my mother. You two have been so nice to me since we met. I feel like I can trust you. Would you mind? Sam and I looked at one another. We have known each other for 7 years and been married for 5 of them. In this case, we each knew exactly what the other was thinking. We each knew we were going to hear more than we wanted to know, but what choice did we have? She obviously needed to talk. She still looked like she was going to cry, so Sam took pity on her and said, Very well, Nancy. You may tell us anything you like. She looked down at the table, still unsure of herself. Finally, she started talking, still looking down at the table. I turned 18 2 weeks after I graduated from high school. That's the day I left home. My father told me that when I turned 18, he was going to. He was a womanizer and a cruel man. My mother dealt with him by turning into an alcoholic. Having no place else to go, I moved in with my boyfriend. 6 months later, I was 2 months pregnant and my boyfriend was gone. I have no idea where he went. I went to a doctor and had an abortion. I knew there was no way I could raise a child. I was young, foolish, and scared. The doctor butchered me. I had to spend a week in the hospital. They tried to repair the damage, but were unable to. I ended up having a partial hysterectomy. The side effect of this is that after about 3 months, I had an insatiable S-drive. I found a good lawyer and sued the doctor. My part of the settlement put me through 4 years of college. I met Tom in college. I was a sophomore and he was a senior. His drive seemed to match mine, and we got married when I graduated. I told him that I couldn't have kids before we married, and he seemed okay with that. He had a nice inheritance from his grandfather, and I had a few thousand left from my settlement. We were the first couple to buy a house in this housing addition. We got first choice. Mike and Janet were the second to move here, and they got the next best location. We immediately became best friends. Mike and Tom were best buddies within 2 weeks. They are conceited, arrogant, egotistical, and overbearing. Within a month we were swapping, and a week after that, they had Janet and I doing it. I didn't like it, but I really didn't have any choice. So I figured I'd just as well enjoy it. Sam said, Wait a minute, Nancy. What do you mean that you didn't have any choice? Nancy paused for a few moments. I could tell she was struggling with something. Finally, staring down at the table, she resumed talking in a subdued voice. Tom and I hosted a poker game not long after we were married. It was my job to be sure everyone had drinks or snacks when they wanted them. Tom selected the clothes he wanted the hostess, me, to wear. White tube top and thin white very tight-fitting short shorts and white 4-inch high-heel shoes. When his 4 buddies arrived, they placed a green blank over our ping pong table and sat down and began to play. Things went pretty good for the first hour. Tom isn't a very good poker player, but he kept me busy running errands, and I think I was somewhat of a distraction for his buddies. He was actually a few bucks ahead. Then, as I walked behind him, I said something to the effect of, Gee, honey, nice hand. And the others immediately folded their cards. Tom went livid with anger. He snatched my arm and yanked me down across his lap. He grabbed a ping pong paddle and started paddling. It was hard, fast, and furious. After a couple of minutes, I was hurting so bad. Tom didn't let up. When he felt his lap get wet, he just kept hitting. Finally, he stopped. I'm sure you have heard of the saying, I'll spank you so you won't be able to sit down for a week. Well, it was a week before I could sit on a seat with padding. It was 2 weeks before I could sit on a kitchen chair. That wasn't the worst of my punishment, though. Tom said the paddling was for my giving away his hand. For pissing on him, he pushed me under the table and said each time a hand was played, I had to give the winner you-know-what. He then told the other players that my services would take the place of his ante for the rest of the game. The guys loved it. They complimented Tom on being a man who knew how to keep a woman in line. They made fun of me. They called me the roulette wheel. Each time one of them won a hand, he would say, Over here, piss pants, and laugh. They played for at least 3 more hours. Not once was I allowed out from under the table during that time. When the game was over, Tom pulled me up and said that this was only a small sample of what would happen if I ever crossed him again. Believe me, I learned my lesson well. Whatever he wants, I do, without question. After telling us this, Nancy was shivering, and tears were starting to form in the corners of her eyes again. I suggested a bathroom break and fresh Cokes to give her time to calm down. When we got sat back down, Sam said, "Okay, Nancy, I think we understand a little better now. You were telling us about how you got started swapping. Please continue." Well, as new couples started moving here, Tom and Mike got the wild idea of seeing how many they could seduce. It became a contest between them. I had to interrupt at that point. "What do you mean, Nancy? How can a married woman be AV?" By this time, she was able to look at us. She smiled and said, "Any woman that is happily married and faithful to her husband is considered to be AV by them." We took turns. When a new couple moved in, if they were attractive, we would start to socialize with them. And when we felt the time was right, we would invite them to join our little group. To keep the contest fair, we would alternate. Either Mike and Janet would approach them, or if it were our turn, Tom and I would make the moves. Of the 96 couples that live in the addition now, more than 20 of them swap with us on a regular basis. We had to induce 4 of those couples to join, but once they did, they found they liked that lifestyle. Sam interrupted this time. "What do you mean by induced, Nancy?" "If we thought one of them might agree, but the other might not, then we would go after them separately. If we felt the woman would agree, then Tom would turn on the charm and seduce her. Then I would approach the husband with the evidence and pretend to be upset. I would talk him into having revenge with me. It actually worked very well. We had to reverse that with the other 3 couples. I seduced the husband, and then Tom went crying to the wife and ended up having revenge with her. Then in order for everything to end happily ever after, we would convince them that the only solution was to continue swapping. As I said, it worked very well, and all 4 couples later thanked us for including them in our group, even if it was by deception." Sam's face just went red. It was plain that she now realized where this was going and was about to blow up. I wanted to do a little yelling myself, but I also wanted to hear the rest of what Nancy had to say. So I said, "Sam, please, let's hear the rest of what she has to say before we kill her." It worked. Sam's color started to subside, and finally she gave me a crooked smile. Nancy, on the other hand, was starting to put on her "I'm scared to death" face. I took her hand and said, "Calm down, Nancy. I'm just joking. No one is going to get hurt." She took another drink, emptying the glass, collected her thoughts, and continued. "When you guys moved in, we started checking you out. After a while, it became apparent that you would have no interest in swapping. You were too much in love with each other. Then we tried seducing you individually. That was a complete failure. I finally convinced Tom that we were wasting our time and that we should just be friends. He wasn't so sure but agreed to back off. Then a week before your birthday, he got what he called the best news of his life. Mike saw Sam meet Fred in a bar and spend 3 hours together. Janet saw Bob having what looked like an intimate dinner with some good-looking redhead. Of course, they told Tom right away. It took him 2 days to come up with a plan. It took him 2 weeks to put it into effect. I knew in my heart it wouldn't work, but he insisted. He finally told me to do it, or else. I got scared then and I didn't want to know what or else was, so I agreed. The evening of girls' night out, we all met here early. Janet and I waited until the downstairs bathroom was busy, and we used that as an excuse to use the one upstairs. She acted as lookout while I went in to borrow your underwear. I got lucky, because I found the personalized and shorts in the second drawer of the first dresser. I hid them in my purse. Then Janet told Sam about Bob's dinner with the redhead, and Mike told Bob about Sam meeting Fred. Remember, Sam, we kept you out as late as possible. That was so Bob would get suspicious. Then last week, Tom and I had it while wearing your underwear. Tom wanted them real messy, so you would be convinced that each other had cheated. All I can say now is that I am very, very sorry for all the pain I caused you. Please find it in your heart to forgive me." We just sat there, me looking at Sam, and Sam looking at me. Nancy was closely watching us and appeared to be holding her breath. Nancy finally had to breathe and let out a long, slow breath. That seemed to break the spell. Sam was the first to speak. "What now, Nancy? What happens now?" "It's quite simple," Nancy said. "You two kiss and make up. I leave town." We sat there and looked at each other, none of us knowing what to say. I finally said, I think I'll go over to Tom's and beat the S out of him. As I started to get up, Nancy put her hand on my arm and said, "Before you do, there is something else you should know." I sat back down and waited. Nancy continued, "I had to take Tom to the emergency room last night. You should have heard him trying to explain how he was standing on a sawhorse in the garage, trying to reach something on the top shelf, lost his balance, and fell astride the sawhorse. The doctor gave him some very powerful painkillers and told him he had to spend at least the next 3 days in bed. He also said that it would be at least a month before he can have it. Sam, I want to thank you for what you did to Tom last night. He's had something like that coming for years. You can't imagine the fear I've been living in, how hard it's been to keep from upsetting him. Seeing him laying there in pain and humiliation like that convinced me that I didn't have to put up with him any longer. When I got up this morning, Tom was passed out on painkillers. All of my clothes and jewelry, along with a few personal items, are out front in the Suburban. I am going to go back home and nurse Tom. I'll see to it that he gets his painkillers on time. The first thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to the bank. I'm going to withdraw half of our checking account and transfer all of the $150,000 in our savings account to a different bank, and it will be in my name only. I am also going to open our safety deposit box and take the $100,000 in cash he has hidden there from the IRS. Then I'll return home and call Janet. I'll have her come over and sit with Tom while I run a few errands. I am not going to tell her that the errands are in Colorado. My mother's older sister and her husband are retired and living there. I called them this morning, and they want me to stay with them until I can find a place of my own. When the divorce is final, Tom will be giving me half of his salary for the next 10 years. If he doesn't, I will go public about this whole mess. He was dumb enough to take pictures and videos of most of the couples involved. I now have them. I will name names if I have to. Some of the people in our little group are very prominent, and the humiliation would ruin them, as well as him. When he figures that out, I have no doubt he will agree to my terms. I now realize that he has never loved me. He has just used my body and used me to entice other people to participate in his little games. One last time, I must tell you how sorry I am and beg for your forgiveness." Sam took her hand and stood up. She gave her a big hug and said, "We forgive you, Nancy. Now, are you sure you're going to be okay? Is there anything we can do to help?" "Thank you, Sam. I will be fine. Please don't tell anyone what I'm doing or where I'm going. You two take care of one another. You really are a wonderful couple." Sam escorted Nancy to the door, and they said goodbye and hugged one more time. She came back to the table and sat down and asked, "Is there any gypsy in your blood?" "What in the world are you talking about, girl? I think it's time for us to find another neighborhood to live in. What do you think?" I thought for a minute and then said, "We start looking the first thing tomorrow morning." We sat there, each of us in deep thought, and we decided things turned out quite well after all, considering what we had been through the past 2 weeks. Then I happened to think and said, "We have 2 wonderful kids at your mom's. Think it's about time to go get them?" Sam suddenly got that impish smile that I loved so much and hadn't seen for over 2 weeks. Her eyes flashed with mischief, and she said, "Honey, I lost something very dear to my heart 2 weeks ago. Would you please come up to the bedroom with me and help me look for it?" My answer was immediate and directly to the point. "I will, if you will help me look for what I lost. I think we are going to be a little late picking up the kids, but that's all right. Grandma and Grandpa love having them and always hate to see them go." The end.